Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year, because this is the first episode of the Russian Threat podcast, as I call it. And in other words, me and Jonathan Fink of Silicon Curtain getting together and having a cup of beverage. I don't know what's in your
That's
mug.
it. Apple juice. That's my drink of choice this year. Yeah.
So healthy. Well, then I think that Happy New Year. Isn't
Well,
it a
Happy New Year. What a start. What a start to the year as well. I mean, it already feels like we've gone through 12 months of trauma and we're not even halfway through. We're not even a week into the new year yet.
and I'm ready for 2027. It almost feels it almost like this administration. I speak for the Trump administration because I live in America. I may speak with a slight accent, but I've been in the United States for nearly 40 years. Actually, I'm a local elected official here in Wisconsin, Rock County, where I have the pleasure and honor of living and serving. And it seems like this administration has a schedule where for 2025 they were going to do Israel and Ukraine. In 2026 they're going to do Venezuela and Greenland.
Well,
Because,
why limit yourself to that? There's Colombia, Cuba. I mean, the list is growing, surely.
like you said, it's only the first week.
Plenty more time. Plenty more countries.
There is plenty more time. But I wonder the difference between Venezuela and Greenland, because he got so emboldened with Venezuela that I think he wants to grab Greenland by the now. And it seems like I'm very encouraged because I'm actually seeing Republican senators speaking up and saying no, this we don't want it, we don't want Greenland. And you can tell from their like reputation and their states they're coming from what they're concerned about. This is not going to have the effect of Crimea coming back to Russia. This is going to be another territory we have to subsidize, and all of this kind of stuff that Republican. And also there are actually a couple of Republicans like Roger Wicker that he's concerned about allies, and what effect this is going to have on the standing that which is really good to know, to feel that there's somebody in the Republican Party who cares. Not Lindsey Graham cares, but like Roger Wicker cares.
Well, Lindsey Graham, I wanted to bring that up to you because we've talked about Marco Rubio, who's had his spine surgically removed. And if you compare his comments prior to 2021, he clearly understood then what was going on. And his comments about the January 6th were very, very clear about how unconstitutional it was, how it amounted to a coup. And yet here he is, he is towing the line. Lindsey Graham is quite literally salivating.
Wait a minute, Marco Rubio. I do want to say this is very important because I do think that he is here for Cuba. He's doing that because he wants to do regime change in Cuba, and for him, this is what Venezuela is. Venezuela bankrolls Cuba, and therefore that fits into the puzzle, even though Trump thinks it's about oil.
And then there's the other aspect, because we're going to get onto this as well. And this is something that, Mark Toth, who writes frequently with The Hill, pointed out, and which I'm trying to expound on. The media and actually a lot of the analysts have focused on oil. Not surprising, because Trump mentioned oil like 29 times in his address. He's the ultimate Bond villain who's going to tell you exactly what the plot is and monologue to you. But actually, there's something else going on here, because the US, with British assistance, it turns out, has just boarded 2 tankers, which has upset Russia. It seems generally upset, not in the sort of performative sense. Now, this is quite interesting because it seems to me that Russia is being extraordinarily quiet about the coup, or whatever it was, the assisted coup that happened, the exfiltration of the leader, probably with the connivance of people within Maduro's inner circle. I mean, this in itself is an interesting, highly performative form of warfare. It's a very theatrical form of warfare made for TV. It almost reminds me of some kind of, Potemkin facade kind of war, a little bit like, and people are going to find this odd, a little bit like the strike on Iran as well, which seemed to be very performative as well. Here we go, we're going in, we're doing it. And yet, when you look at the analysis of the actual change that's been affected, well, it's almost minimal, if not non-existent, and that's perhaps by design. And of course, in Venezuela, the regime is pretty much intact, although now perhaps it understands a little bit that it is a vassal of the US. So there's all this stuff going on, and I think Russia behind the scenes may well have said, "Okay, we have our sphere, you have yours. This has been discussed quite a lot, but don't touch our assets." However, what seems to be going on is that China and Russia are going to be blocked from Venezuelan oil, from that system, and this is quite a strategic loss. And then the US, along with the British, boarded two Venezuelan tankers that were trying to reflag as Russian to escape sanctions. There's some interesting kind of detail beneath the surface. Now, this isn't to condone what's going on. What's going on is highly illegal and disturbing, but there's some interesting subtexts behind the events.
There certainly are, and I will take it through. But I think that the points, some of the great points that you've made, Jonathan, because I feel like if this could lead, actually, if this was capable of reversing the trend, a very dangerous trend that we're watching now, where there is an improvement and the desire to improve relations between Russia and the United States, and if we could somehow reverse that trend, that'd be a good thing. And so if this could lead to something, I think there'll be a lot of people who'll be very supportive of this idea, because we do need to get to kind of Cold War state right now with Russia, because that's part one. Before we start to, at least we need to like stop digging the hole. We need to have some kind of an understanding of where the threat is coming from, and that we shouldn't be looking for every possible way to take sanctions off Russia, but instead we should be looking for understanding that Russia is having a very dangerous influence and impact on American politics and world politics right now. And if that comes through a tanker conflict, I'll take it. So that's one. Two is, I think that, the aggression here is very much performative, because Trump and this administration, they show propensity for dominance, for violence, for aggression, but they don't have stomach for war. It's kind of a cowardly bully way of looking at the world, but just to kind of cut the crap kind of way. That's what they're doing here. They're okay to punch somebody out as long as there's no consequences for them of any sort. That's
and a reality TV version as well, isn't it? It's kind of sanitized reality TV, gamified version.
And on that level, I gotta say, I've been really enjoying the podcasts, Daily Beast podcast that they do inside Trump's head. And in fact, on Rashkin Report News, I started doing recaps of some of the episodes, because I feel it's so important to really try to understand the mindset of this person who has access to a lot of nuclear weapons, and that he looks at reality as attention that he has to consume. And it's like, if he was a YouTuber, I could almost understand. I could kind of relate.
So is this the format with Joanna Coles and especially Michael Wolff, who seems to really have a direct route into Trump's head?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to understand, because we keep trying to find, and at least I feel like my viewers are trying to find a rationalization for this, somehow, oil, something. But this is attention-getting exercise, which is why it's so performative and TV-based. Then you mentioned Potemkin, and it's a story that I heard, because one of the things that I like to do is play piano for silent films. You wouldn't have guessed it, but it's what I like to do.
What a great thing to do.
It's so fun, because it's like you can add color to, it's like having a one-on-one with Charlie Chaplin or somebody. And there's a famous Potemkin, Battleship Potemkin, which is a famous movie from, he was named after Potemkin, who did the villages. So that's the connection there. But the battleship was the performative part of this violence. This was a famous movie, and the story goes that the director, was his name, Eisenstein, was walking down the sea, whatever, the walkway there along with a lady, and all the ships were watching him, saying, like, when is the signal? Because they were supposed to all fire at the same time. And then so he walks with, along with this lady, and he says, it's amazing, because when I go like this, we're going to have a fire. And then they all fired. And so they missed the big shot for the movie because the one coordinated battleship was done to show a lady the power that he had. So Potemkin keeps misfiring. Next, Don
There's
wrote.
a little interesting fact there. There was a reenactment, wasn't there, for the cameras of the October Revolution, because the real thing wasn't really captured on documentary film. And so I think it was on Nevsky
May not have looked like it did in the movie.
Well, at a smaller scale, you know. I mean, it was a small terrorist coup rather than a big mass movement. So they had to create something for the propagandistic media. And it is reported that because they used live ammo in shooting it, more people were injured in the reenactment than in the actual revolution and storming of the Winter Palace itself.
See, this is why folks watch this channel, because for the kind of trivia information that I didn't know. So hit like and subscribe to Silicon Curtain and Rashkin Report Perspectives. Also, yes, follow me on Substack. That's what I keep forgetting to say. Don Rowe Doctrine. I had a video on my channel, Jonathan, that I called Don Rowe because I thought it was like so perfect. And now he says that's the official name of Doctrine. So I feel
there we go. You've stolen your branding. Well, I've tweaked it slightly. I've got an episode coming tomorrow called the Dumb Row Doctrine, which I think is a slightly better fit.
You know, it kind of feels like it. The part that strikes me just outside of the dumb part is the useful idiots, because we're dealing with people who are trying to be useful but are also idiots, and this is that's the challenge. So, but Dunrow Doctrine, I think that's what's happening in action, and it's sad to see that the United States decided to exchange being leader of the free world for being a bully of the Western Hemisphere. That seems like such a downgrade, and it's so disappointing to see the United States just kind of go, you know what, you can have all of this, it's too expensive, we're going to go and beat up our neighbors. Okay, that's real great, that's real good. And in the end, it comes down to, for me, that Trump loves Putin. And so as long as that dynamic continues to be the main trend, everything else is going to just kind of follow out of that in some way. To me, that's the Northern Star that was, is, and remains the guiding light of our politics, no matter how much Trump lives in TV world and in the world of it. It's his love and admiration for Putin and for Putin's rules is really, I feel like, is driving Trump.
But this is the interesting question, isn't it? This is the one which we continuously circle back to. That is that he clearly has admiration for Putin and the power he wields and the effect, the fear that Putin is able to project onto his own populace and onto his neighbors and so on. He loves the violence. He loves all these aspects, as well as the performative ones of authoritarians, the military parades, the uniforms, the show, all of the glitz, none of the substance. He's clearly admiring of that, and that's what he wants. He's on camera saying he wants that same kind of deference and razzmatazz surrounding him. And of course, the actual pictures of the military parade that he got didn't quite live up to that, reality. It's kind of Temu version of a North Korean military parade. But here's the big question: is he enamored of Putin? Does he seek his Putin's approval? Certainly, some of my friends like Vlad Vexler have done great videos on why Trump's narcissistic complex seek him to need that kind of approval of Putin. Or is he tied to Putin come what may? Or is there a point where he says, I admire your methods, but I'm more powerful now. The apprentice has become the master. And now you're lower down the pecking order than I am. And I've learnt your rules and internalized them. Right, I'm going to turn them back on you. This is the bit that perhaps is, some will be screaming, don't be so ridiculous. He's absolutely enthralled to Putin. This will never happen. He'll never turn. And he's an actual asset of the Russian dictator. And others will say, well, okay, he's enamored of it, but at some point, yeah, he will turn around and use those same techniques to show his dominance over Putin.
That is so interesting to hear you say that, because it really makes me think of several different things, ranging from the fact that I know so many people who dislike Trump, but like his methods. And that's really terrifying, because you understand that if that's just like they have a problem with him on aesthetic level, but methodologically they're cool with it, because kindness has to have fists, as they have it, as they say in Russian. Добро должно быть с кулаками. And what this is going to is fear. It's the fear factor, because I think we'll know when the dynamic power ratio has changed, when Putin will act scared of Trump. When Putin will be fearful, that's when we see. Because right now, Putin is not playing afraid. Putin is playing like he's crazy, he's determined, he's strong, whatever, but he's not scared. And so that will be the signal for us that that's what happens. But also the dynamic that I just described in the video that I'm going to be putting out shortly, that was, I think is something to think about. And I wonder, I guess, what you're thinking about it is to what extent acting like a true power doesn't need to scare anybody. True power is clearly, like, the United States doesn't need to scare. It's pretty clear United States is the biggest power. So when you have somebody who is somebody who is weak, they're trying to, instead of show that instead of being strong, they're trying to instead scare somebody. It's a weaker it's a weaker way of attack. Say, just be scared. Oh, we're going to attack Europe. Oh, we're going to attack NATO. Oh, we're capable of all of this. But in reality, Russia they've kind of overextended themselves. They've really went too far. What happens in Venezuela, what is happening right now in Venezuela, is another proof of how much Russia has overextended itself. And now it operates on fear. And so responding to this fear in a fearful way is counterproductive in this situation.
And it's only going to get worse now. I've just been scripting the episodes going live later this evening, which looks at an interesting regime insider in Russia and comments he made just before Christmas. This is a guy called Leonid Ivashov, who is, a core inner circle elite military kind of guy. And he's been apparently critiquing the war. His thesis here is exactly that. One, it was based on a false strategic framing that NATO is a threat. It's not, and that it's been a singular failure, both military, but also on the home front. It has hollowed out and eaten out Russia's resources. So I think that's an interesting analysis, and that very much ties in what you're saying. This is a case of overreach, but Putin's now in the spot where he cannot stop. I think Trump genuinely wants to be seen as the person who stopped the war, because one, for a short period of time, it would make great headlines. Two, he'd have a better claim on that shiny bauble, the Nobel Prize.
Like, it's just so funny, because I'm thinking, he really was planning to get that Peace Prize between Christmas and 3rd of January.
He was.
Really.
And he doesn't want the sort of sloppy seconds from, the Venezuelan opposition leader. I mean, it's, he knows that's not a real prize there, getting it by default. But, I think he generally wants peace. I think he may also come to realization that Putin cannot have peace, is not ready for peace, and that peace is the very last thing that Putin can deliver for a whole variety of reasons. So he has to look for other things to fill the news headlines. See how this so-called peace stuff that dominated the headlines through December, maybe because there was a paucity of other chaos going on and he had to have something desperately to distract from Epstein. He's got his headlines, at least for this week and probably next week. And that may explain the uptick in Greenland until, if that doesn't come off, or if there's pushback, as now seems from Denmark, he will latch onto something else. So yes, Colombia, Cuba, you probably better watch out, because he's more likely to be able to fill those headlines with acts there. The same with his interdiction of Russian ships. Is he doing it for a strategic purpose? Certainly the Brits who are involved will be. We're not going to commit resources to something which is technically probably illegal under maritime law unless we see a strong strategic purpose behind it. But for him, it may just be another way to keep those headlines rolling and keep Epstein off the front pages.
Jonathan, I will say a couple of things, but first I want to bring in a couple of comments because I think that they're great. Tim Patriot writes, Yuri is a left-wing nut job. To which I say, well, you just write in comments, do I sound like, if this is what a left-wing nut job sounds like? Of course, Tim Patriot continues, wait a minute, both these guys are far left as I can see. Well,
That's right.
yes,
I'm a complete communist.
like, wait a minute.
Real admissions there,
Right, and of course, what I think is great is a comment here that says that I prefer right and wrong. Let's see, I like honest and dishonest, not left and not right. So yeah, I think we're both are being here pretty honest. So you deal with it, Team Patriot.
Yeah, I'd say freedom or unfreedom, and frankly, Trump represents a particularly toxic flavor of unfreedom.
Absolutely. Next, I think it's important to acknowledge the Epstein case in the sense that it was, the story was blown up by right-wing conspiracy theorists, not with the goal apparently of trying to solve any crimes, but with the goal of pursuing and punishing Democrats who are supposed to be the ones to be found guilty all over it. And when it turned out that it's a lot of other people, Democrats don't care what happens to those that are guilty, whether they're Democrats or not, and Trump is all over it, MAGA lost a lot of interest, and not, in the case period, because for them, this was a vehicle to punish Democrats, not anything else. And so that's really kind of disappointing, but I think it's important to understand that it still matters, because even though I don't think that Epstein file is going to blow up MAGA, it's going to shave off a few percentage points here and there and here and there, and it diminished the interest and popularity of this president who is tarred and feathered. He's not just a naked emperor. He's now tarred and feathered emperor. And
well, this is interesting. From you mentioned the Bulwark, Midas Touch, and other media channels are ones that I'm sort of interested in tapping into. They've been reporting on the sort of MAGA podcast ecosystem, and you could say that had a huge influence in getting Trump elected and buoying him up. And of course, one of the central narratives that fueled that ecosystem was releasing the Epstein stuff, because hey, it's chock full of Democrats and evil leftists. It does seem that there's this incredible fragmentation of the MAGAsphere. That is the MAGAsphere that perhaps is not dependent on Russian money, or maybe they've decided, to flip and cause sort of chaos. But there seems to be some sort of genuine discontent there. Candace Owens, God, say for her name makes me feel slightly nauseous. But they're turning on Ben Shapiro turning on Tucker Carlson, and so it goes on. Alex Jones, who I never thought I would ever have a sensible word coming out of his mouth, is slating Trump in quite an entertaining fashion. And then we have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I can't believe I'm going to utter this phrase, is one of the harshest and most perceptive critics of Trump now out there. I'm not saying she's fully, transferred to the reality-based community, but at least her invective is quite entertaining and seems to hit the target.
I think that it's a very interesting phenomenon to observe if we think that there will be more elections. Because because it's almost like, I'm sorry, I speak Russian as my first language. I have to be cynical, otherwise I feel like a pink pony. So I have to kind of go like, okay, if there are elections, I think that the fragmentation is really fascinating to watch, and people like Dan Bongino, who I guess is now getting out of FBI and is getting back to Twitter, he's like assistant director of FBI. That's like a dream job for a lifetime career. People, FBI. And he'd rather be what we do, because that gets him more likes and subscribe and also money. So he called Matt Gaetz horrible things that I can't even remember. And this was yesterday. And Megyn Kelly saying that there's no any sort of criticism or skepticism on Fox News except rah, rah, rah for Trump. Like, hello. And of course, there's Ben Shapiro and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And so there's a kind of like a certain Venn diagrams where we have those people on one side, and then we have all the JD Vances and those. And so far, those that are hoping that Marco Rubio is going to run for president, the last thing I heard is that he said he's going to support JD Vance as soon as he announces. So there's the official path through JD Vance, and that's where all the techno-fascists line up and all that stuff. But they are splintering. And it is good to watch. And I think on that level, neocons. Do you remember those neocons who were like about going to Iraq and will be met with flowers and all that kind of stuff? Right now, on one hand, we're seeing that there is this kind of a resurgence of neocons, sort of that kind of we're going to go to other places and do whatever we want kind of a mindset. But to their credit, at least neocons were like interested in spreading democracy. And these people are just kind of lazy imperialists who are just trying to extract resources from different places and use our military to support our oil companies who knew about the Venezuela invasion before and after, while Congress was not notified.
And their illegality, their aggression, their coercion was almost always targeted at adversaries and at the proxies of adversaries. The difference here with Trump is that his lazy performative imperialism is scattergun. It's not even that. It is targeted as much at allies as it is at adversaries. In fact, allies who are not authoritarian tend more often to be painted as adversaries than actual authoritarian adversaries. So there seems to be a clear and deep bias against rule of law, against democracy, against anyone who is representative of, say, the old world order. That now encompasses most of Europe, with the exception of Hungary and Orban.
How long are we going to be referring to those countries as United States allies? That's what I'd like to, because it feels like we're not using the right terms anymore.
Sorry, it's a comment Starsky's made here, which has cracked me up. Candice is like my ex, a walking reminder that peace is priceless. But
that's what Trump said. Not about Starsky's ex, but that peace is all he wants, and this is all about world peace. And isn't that great? And why we're laughing? So this is also depressing in terms of diplomacy and politics, because now we're back to this kind of an old world 19th century, I guess, maybe before, where you have rulers saying something and then the diplomats trying to explain why it's a good thing, where, and it's just, it seems really weird to see this in America. But I got to say, considering what's happening right now in Minneapolis, just up the street from me here, because I live in Wisconsin and it's a few hours in the car, and you're in Minneapolis, and I have friends there, and it's very worrying, because there was a woman who was killed, 37-year-old woman, white woman, who was just 4 blocks from where George Floyd was killed. And it's a dreadful situation. The city is on the edge, and I gotta say, it looks really interesting from the racial point of view, because when we had the BLM, Black Lives Mattered, white America all too often looked at this going, wow, this is so unruly. Can they have institutions, go to court, go to police station and get this figured out? And
there would have been some people who said, look, this is horrific, but at the end of the day, this guy had a criminal record, and this and that and the other. Here you have a middle-class white person caught in the crossfire, being labeled as a terrorist.
That is so relatable. This could truly happen to anybody. This is something that any one of us drives up and down the street, can stop because there's some incident, is turning around, gets nervous because there's people coming up from all directions, and then before you know it, this happens. So when the mayor of Minneapolis comes out and says to ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis, that's really, people are getting serious. And it's a governor of Minnesota told people not to take the bait, but hello, I mean, a person died. And it's a kind of really death that is showing that this is going to be different level than BLM, because in this country, when you have black people protesting, when you have white people protesting, it carries different level of impact. And it is almost, I wonder what black people think, with all due respect, looking at this and going, oh, now you're worried. Now this crossed the line. But I don't want to make any assumptions. I think this is a horrible situation. And
it's deeply troubling. A friend of mine, I mean, just to inject in there, a friend of mine who will remain unnamed, who is black, and you know, on the sort of I would say on the Democrat side of things, I asked, you know, what are you going to do to you know, really push back against this authoritarian slide? And his view was the white folks have got to feel the pain first. They're going to feel the pain, or you know, this will be a wasted effort.
You know, and if that, yeah, this is where we are now. All lives matter, yeah, or the white lives matter, or it's crazy. This is just not what we're used to here, and not what I think we're willing to accept. And who is going to feel the pain, and to what extent? This is also, Minnesota is a reasonably liberal state. Trump is having a problem right now with Minnesota. There's a scandal there that's connected with theft of a lot of money potentially. There's an investigation. You know, if you follow Fox News, then you know all the details, because that's been the hottest apparently problem in the world. And it's already been, as far as I understand, already uncovered and was dealt with, but it brought attention more to Minnesota, and the governor is now saying he's not seeking re-election, and Trump brought in 2,000 ICE agents into Minnesota, Twin Cities, because Minneapolis, St. Paul, and this is it's a situation that could occur anywhere, and if that doesn't take attention off the Epstein files pretty darn well, then Trump will do something else tomorrow.
This almost makes it sound as if it's by design, and it seems to me, and I've been getting into a bit of a debate with some of my pro-Ukraine conservative colleagues about this, dare I say it, saying that this appears by design. When you have large numbers of very poorly trained, very strongly equipped in a kind of militarized sense, a hyper-militarized, a militarized kind of sense, very few guardrails, no real sense of accountability, so they have absolute impunity, and then you flood the zone, this stuff is bound to happen. And I compared the optics of this to things like the British use of irregular, dare I say it, terrorist forces in Ireland in the early part of the 20th century, a group called the Black and Tans, and Oman. I mean, you may remember from the early 90s the Russian paramilitarized police and forces called Oman, who, when they're not sort of, you know, beating up kids at concerts and this kind of stuff, would be subbed out to various oligarchs to you know, take down their rivals and so on. These guys were seriously scary, and already back in the 90s, Chechnya was both a training ground and a recruiting ground for these kind of psychotic thugs, many of whom were starting to develop right-wing, you know, nationalist, let's say right-wing in the Russian context, probably doesn't mean anything, but more of a sort of nationalist identity, imperialist identity. So this it seems to me there's a direct correlation here, and that something like this is not just inevitable by accident, but inevitable by design.
What is the argument about? Like, what do they argue?
Well, that everything I said is wrong and not true.
But I was like, wait a minute, but like that okay, yes, and okay.
Well, they come back with like, oh, but previous administrations haven't dealt with immigration, and you have to inject fear, and this is the only way to tackle it. Some really repugnant, I would say, points of view, because all of their stated aims can be achieved
because they are so
without this.
They're so used to having to justify whatever the position Republican leadership has taken, they automatically just go in that direction. but where they have been taken to is such a dark place now that trying to come up with how they got there seems wrong, seems immoral, seems unethical. That's just part of this equation. I think that that's just.
Well, I called them an episode yesterday. I called them what was it? Ice Gestapo, which I didn't come up with that phrase. I think that was off. Someone from Midas Touch was using that, but it seems to kind of fit. The question for me is, where does this go in 2026? Because Trump has just said that the military budget is going to increase by 50%, up to $1.5 trillion. That's an additional $500 billion. Now, of course, this isn't all for military, because these ICE forces potentially, I would imagine, are going to be major recipients of this. So where is this heading? I mean, I know where I think it's heading, but it seems to be heading in a full authoritarian mode where you need huge internal coercive forces to get you through this next stage in the authoritarian slide, which is, as you hinted at the start of the episode, the suspension of democratic process.
And I think that's where it's important to remember the attitude of Stephen Miller, who perennially basically points at who is going to stop us. And that's the challenge that I've been looking at since the moment Trump was elected. Who is going to stop him? Because he put people in positions of those that are supposed to hold him accountable, that are his people. So when Ukrainians say, like, where are the nurses? Where's the nursing staff? Where's the doctors? Where's police? Those are his people. And if you look at what's happening to the vaccination and healthcare in this country, yes, the nurses are also his people. He's in charge of that too. But I just got to share. This is my kind of cross-cultural experience, that I have this weird, scary feeling of deja vu, because I watched a few years ago, I watched how in Moscow, this must have been maybe 2019, around there, and you had groups of like large gatherings that are protesting in the city center practically. And there's Amon and these spacemen with their big round, heads, whatever, on, and how they kind of walk around, and then they see somebody in the crowd, and they go for that person, and they grab them and drag them out of the crowd, and the crowd chants, "Steed, shame, shame." And an hour ago, I'm watching CNN 2 hours ago, and I'm seeing a protest in Minneapolis. And I see these lovely, people who just got really moved by a death of a 37-year-old woman, who are gathering there really, really absolutely peacefully, because this is how Americans are for the overwhelming part, is it's all peaceful protests. And they are surrounded by ICE, and then ICE sees somebody in the crowd, and they go in there and they grab somebody and they throw them to the ground, and then they drag them out for no reason that we can tell, and the crowd chants, "Shame, shame, shame." And I went, this is really similar. But I expect things to go differently in the United States than they did in Russia, because the Putin's been in power for how many years? Russia's been going through negative selection for how many centuries? United States is a different country, but as a friend of mine said, that if we decide to go full Nazi, the Germans will be, jealous, of how we're going to do this. So we shall see. Right now, we're seeing that immigrants are the new Jews. And this is administration where that part of it right now, Stephen Miller part, seems to be working in overdrive and possibly most effective than anyone. I was a little concerned when I saw him at negotiation table with Zelensky and
that was weird, wasn't it? Yeah, that was a surprise. Yeah.
And I was trying to, I still don't have a really good explanation for what brought him there or what he contributed to that discussion, other than to point out his general level of importance and influence in that administration. He seems to be the
could be it, yeah.
And that's at least part of it. So
and they just forced out Kellogg. So this may have been a clear demonstration that, I've destroyed Kellogg. He's gone. He's done. I'm here. I've won, etc.
The only thing would have been better than that is if Stephen Miller would have taken out some Kellogg's cereal and started munching it right there at the negotiation table. These are the people that we're dealing with. They're trying to distract our attention from Ukraine with Venezuela, from Epstein files with attacking Americans on American streets, because, of course, I mean, I didn't mention it, but the lady who was killed was a United States citizen. So this made absolutely, it did not fit into anything. This is
And
going
likely not a protester. It seems that she was a observer of the proceedings, monitor, as it were, which is in normal circumstances should be a fairly passive role. And of course, those who are going like, oh, but immigrants, technically, ICE have no power whatsoever to search a vehicle, detain a person, unless they have clear and demonstrable suspicion, evidential suspicion that it relates to an immigration case. So people saying that, one side or the other, it's 100% clear this act was entirely illegal, not just the violent conclusion of it and the fact the doctor was prevented from coming onto the scene and the mayhem that unfolded, but the entire thing is illegal. Challenging a person who they had zero suspicion was had anything to do with immigration violations. It's illegal from start to end.
We have a comment here. It says, not so. The illegals are breaking the law. The Jews had a reason pre-World War II. These illegals, it's an economic thing. Be honest here. I think the Jews were legal until somebody took away their papers, and then they were no longer legal. I think it's a matter of paperwork, and I think that's a little strange. But the other thing that I wanted to discuss with you, because we're just burning through things
today.
Send
Elon and Melania home, because if you got to, this is one where I'll agree with Trump, right? If you're going to have an absolute zero tolerance policy, well, apply that to your own elite as well. Bye-bye, Melania. Bye-bye, Elon.
That's Monroe doctrine. We only follow rules we want to follow. That's it. So Mark Kelly, Senator Mark Kelly, really important story here, because one of the things that Ben Hodges mentions, and I'm sure he mentioned this to you all the time, in the sense that it is an important opportunity, duty, whatever you want to call it, for retired members of the military to speak up against injustice that is taking place and to speak up their concerns, because members of the military, retired members of the military, have understanding that regular civilians do not have. And this is me paraphrasing, and just me speaking in agreeing with Ben Hodges about the value and importance of those voices of expertise, experience. When we talk about boots on the ground, what do boots on the ground think? What do people that have had boots on the ground, what do they think? And when we have Senator Mark Kelly, who is a retired, decorated a veteran, pilot, astronaut, whatever you want to name it, husband of a woman who suffered tremendous tragedy because of the gun violence, when he was practically executed, in her face was shot, and lived to tell about it, and continues to be an advocate. This man is criticized for making a video with other retired service members because he seemed, I guess, was the most vulnerable one. And they're trying to silence not just him. He's a senator. I think that this is a terrible mistake by the administration, one of many today, where they're making themselves an enemy. And I think Mark Kelly, they're making a hero who is now going to be probably running for president, because why not? And when we have Gavin Newsom and we have Mark Kelly, there will be a lot of people who will say that Mark Kelly is a better candidate for what we need right now, and who would not have run if Trump didn't decide to pick this battle.
This would be a genuine change, having several strong candidates, real competition for a Democratic leader.
Absolutely. But I'm just really concerned about the chilling effect that will have on our retired members of our military, who will be concerned to speak up for fear that they will lose some benefits or they will be singled out. And so this is the nightmare is ongoing.
For people who don't really understand how Russia works, and it seems that most commentators, most journalists, and even some historians actually don't have a clue, it's very, very simple. Everybody is dependent on the largesse of the state. And you only are able to feed at the trough, whether you get small doses of resources, which is just a monthly pension paid, or you get large resources out of that vertical and that system. you get zero, you get zip, unless you show compliance and obedience and fealty to the system. Everything comes from the state, and you owe everything to the state. Doesn't matter where you are on that pecking order. Trump's actions are bringing in a Soviet Russian form of control, which is to make everyone and everything dependent on the state, and to pervert, let's say, the market and market forces and economics by making nothing independent of state power and fear.
Preach, Jonathan, preach. This is great. Yes, absolutely. That's the level at which he operates, is making everyone dependent. And the same way, yes, the Soviet system only allowed you to exist within the system. There was no exit. And if you decided not to participate, you were an enemy. And that's why you have all the counter spy operations always looking inside the country for people who are disagreeing. And yes, Trump would like to institute that here. And yes, he would like to use AI and technology to help him accomplish those means. The question,
it's the Putinist system as well, which again, this is one that commentators, when they talk about oligarchs, they don't understand that actually even, an incredibly rich and supposedly powerful person in Russian society is still entirely dependent on their compliance and their obedience to the state, to keep enjoying the access to those material resources and status. There's no such thing as an independent person in that system.
In fact, there's yes, a person, man, woman, and I think that's maybe that's the takeaway for me here. The end point is that had friends over Christmas and had great discussions, and we were saying how people should speak up and talk about uncomfortable things, and such as the fact that what's happening with our country, and we really had great conversation. And the part is this always discussion of, is the battle lost or is there still a battle going on? And the answer that I like, the solution possible, is women. Because one of the different things between Russia and the United States is not just rare earth minerals, or dictatorships, or whatever, but it's women as the difference. Because in the United States, in the past 100 years, women have gained a lot of power that they did not have before. So did minorities as well. But I feel that women, particularly white women, but just all women, are going to have a tremendous impact on the direction of this country in a way that has not been truly tested as a force variable before. We've heard about Middle Ages, things in Britain, and then different, cultures respecting women here and there. But to this extent and this quality, I think this is the first time we're going to really see what that women power is all about.
That will be interesting to unfold, definitely. And this idea, yes, this idea of resistance, I think, is interesting. This is why Ukraine is endlessly fascinating. It's the culture, the instinct to resist tyranny, coercion, control in all its forces, rather than to choose so-called stability, peace, security over that. We're going to have to learn something, or relearn something, I think, of that instinct. Because the trend that I see, and I'm sure we're going to be discussing this a lot in our conversations, the trend for Western media, the trend for many Western analysts, and especially the public, is just to hope all this stuff goes away, is to normalize it, to downplay it, not to have a culture and a mechanic of resistance. And I would say energetic dialogue, not the kind of, dare I say, sort of, this is where I'll there are many Russians in the diaspora, many people who fled after 2022, who are now living lives in various countries. I know many of them consume opposition, dissident media and resources. Many of them know exactly what's going on, and many of them will have a reasonably sophisticated point of view that we can get behind. But this is all completely immaterial unless you have a culture of resisting and coalescing to fight. Being informed is not nearly enough.
What if that Magna Carta document that you guys signed over there all those years ago, what if that was just the beginning of your downfall? See, democracy, equal rights, separation of powers. I guess somebody wasn't strong enough to handle it all himself. Yes, I think that deserves a
I'm
like.
lost for words on that one. Yes.
How you did you? Yes, it's crazy. It almost seems like this is where when we had the Trump last time, we were wondering if the whole history of the United States was destined about coming to like really just a racist country, and this is everything. It just proves that. But then, like Biden comes to, is elected, and we're like, well, no, our history is about overcoming all of those terrible things, and now we're back here. So, does the point where we are in 2026 means that if the world ended now, democracy was a lost cause and a bad experiment 1,000 years ago?
I think here I'm a little more positive because it seems to me that Trump is not representative either of the American spirit or history or its economic model. He's not necessarily representative at all of traditional conservatism either. And he's trying to impose upon the US a model that does not fit its profile as a power. And I've been looking at some stuff which I find quite interesting, which is an academic called Sarah Payne or Sally Payne, who talks a lot about this sort of stuff, about the different types of power, land-based empires and maritime powers and their different mechanics of how they exert power and etc. It seems to me that Trump is trying to impose the mechanics of a land-based imperial autocracy on the US, which is essentially built on the British model, which is as a maritime commercial power. So in the longer term, if he's trying to operate in a way that absolutely doesn't fit the profile of US, which will inevitably lead to a dramatic diminution of its power and authority, then I think there will be a reset, simply because people long term don't want to be poorer. And somebody somewhere will realize that actually this way of operating does not fit who we are, and it's not successful.
I agree with you in slightly different way because I feel like Trump is trying to make us into USSR.
Yes.
And that really didn't work for USSR very well if you look at it in quality of life of people. But one of the things that made USSR is that they didn't care about quality of life of people. And so
And they don't really have other options, I mean.
exactly right. Monopoly is how that works. And so for Trump to create a USSR where people don't have a choice and he's doing well and his personal economy is A plus 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 plus, then there's no problem. Now, if that doesn't work out and the country actually collapses internally, economically, like Russia, then what do? You scare others. You start wars, you terrify neighbors, and that's how Russia does it. Trump is willing to play by the same set of rules. So when our economy falters, when things go really bad, we'll just go more to war with others. Got it? And but what I hear you say and agree with me is that in the United States, there's still a good, strong chance that in the battle between TV and refrigerator will stand its ground. Because we really like our food. We really like our quality of life. This is not something that, like Russia had World War II experience. Nah, I think they still justify whatever hardships people have by that. And so for the next 100 years, they'll be justifying whatever hardships there are in Russia because of Ukraine war. Because, evil Ukrainians did all this to Russia. But in America, we do have elections. Yes, people have questions, but it seems like this is, this is where I'm like become all of a sudden American. This is where but we do have okay. But we do have people who really want change and will expect change and will be really upset if there's no change opportunity provided to them that they feel is, reasonable because we've always had it. Unlike Russia, which was always, except for a few years, not free, we're used to having a feeling of freedom. So I think that Trump is trying to manage this terrible situation that he creates every day by, having fear also because he's weak. So a true power would need to terrify others, but he does. So maybe there will be elections, maybe there won't be elections. But I do believe in equality, in importance and value of American refrigerator, although they're not made in America, probably. But you know,
This is it. That's why we're not, I think, heading towards the Hunger Games. We are going through a deep trough, but one which is going to cause a reset that may end up being quite healthy. Because, and I said this right, and I was thinking it right from the first day of Biden's inauguration in his last term. There was no sense that he was going to deal with the systemic problems. There was no sense whatsoever that he understood the gravity of the problems. There was no sense that he understood the depth of fragility and brittleness that had, crept into the democratic process, and no real sense of the threat from, I think, Russian external interference. I just think there was this horrific kind of normalization, business as usual. That won't happen next time. I do think there'll be another election, simply because Trump is just so ineffective and weak and brutish that he won't be able to pull off a coup, even though he's going to try to do that. And next time around, we're going to get characters who are far more switched on and will be able to diagnose the problem in a far more strategic way. People who are much earlier on in their careers, and like Gavin Newsom, as you say, or Mark Kelly. So we could be seeing something quite positive. The question is, do we get through the next couple of years? Because I think they are going to be rough.
Well, that's why people turn to good YouTube channels and people who analyze the situation and pay attention to things, because it is going to be rough. It is going to be crazy. And it frankly gets me excited, because I feel like we're living through some incredible times, and those that survive will have some stories to tell. And in the meantime, we'll just keep talking about this with Jonathan. And Jonathan, I really appreciate the work that you do, and the guests that you have, and the conversations that start on your channel and on my channel. So, hey, everyone, hit like, subscribe, follow me on Substack, follow Silicon Curtain everywhere. Support for, the free journalism, because, Russia is not going to be paying our bills.
No, nor's MI5, just to correct some of the sort of comments that endlessly get fired at me. Unfortunately, democracy does not tend to fund the things it needs, but dictatorships always fund the sort of minions and liars who fulfill their agenda. But
so it's all up to us, ladies and gentlemen. I'm counting on you. Jonathan, thanks so much, and until next time.
Real pleasure.